My maid used to add poison into my drink every night. She thought I didn't notice, but I started to feel weaker and weaker each time. I would drink, and within minutes my head would spin, my body would feel heavy, and I would fall unconscious. At first I thought it was just stress, but then I began noticing the timing. It always happened after she served me. One night I pretended to sip the drink but didn't swallow. I lay back as if I had fainted, and that's when I heard whispers. My husband entered the room, and the two of them began talking, not even checking if I was really asleep. They touched each other, laughed together, and that's when she confessed the truth. She said she was in love with him. She said she couldn't resist because of his body, because of how much she wanted him, because he was bigger than anyone she had ever been with. And my husband didn't push her away. He kissed her. If you want more stories like this, support us by subscribing to my channel. I stayed still, my fists clenched, my heart racing. But I kept listening. They spoke about me as if I was already gone, as if I was nothing but a burden. She told him she had been poisoning me to make me weaker, to push me toward death slowly, so that they could be free together. And instead of being horrified, he encouraged her. They were planning a future behind my back while I lay there, pretending to be unconscious, barely able to control the anger burning inside me. The next day, I poured the drink into a separate container and sent it quietly for testing. The results confirmed what I already knew. It was poisoned. That was the proof I needed. But I didn't stop there. I set up cameras in the kitchen and in the lounge. Days later, I had everything on video. Her pouring liquid from a small vial into my drink, him standing right beside her, watching, smiling, and then the two of them kissing when they thought no one could see. With the evidence in my hand, I went to the police. They tested the samples themselves and confirmed it. When the police came to arrest her, she cried, begged me to forgive her, said she only did it because she had fallen in love with my husband. She even admitted she couldn't resist him because of his size, because he made her feel things she had never felt before. And he stood there quietly, not defending me, not denying a thing. The man I had spent years with just lowered his eyes like I was nothing. That was the day everything changed. That was the day everything changed. I stood there in the police station, watching her weep and beg, and watching him avoid my eyes. It was as if the two people I trusted most had turned into strangers right in front of me. When the police took her away in handcuffs, she kept turning back, crying. But her words made me colder. She shouted that she loved him, that she didn't regret it, and that I should understand why she did it. My husband didn't even flinch. He didn't come to my side, didn't try to hold me, didn't even defend himself. He let her scream her so-called love for him in front of everyone, and he just stayed silent. When we got home that night, the house felt like a grave. He tried to sit across from me, but I couldn't even look at him. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From anger. I asked him directly, "How long has this been going on?" He just sat there staring at the floor, lips pressed together. I slammed my hand on the table and demanded an answer. And that's when he finally muttered that it had been months. Months of lies. Months of her touching my things, standing in my kitchen, serving me poison while he knew the truth. He admitted he didn't stop her because he liked the attention, because she made him feel young again. And when I asked him if he ever loved me, he couldn't even answer. That silence hurt more than the betrayal itself. I couldn't sleep that night. Every corner of the house felt haunted. Every glass of water, every plate of food felt tainted. I walked into the kitchen and stared at the bottles she had left behind, the spices she touched, the cupboards she opened. It all made me sick, and when I went back into my bedroom, the bed felt like a battlefield where love had died. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The next day, the police called me again for follow-up. They told me she confessed to everything. She told them she had been slipping poison slowly into my drinks, hoping I'd weaken enough for an accident to finish me. She even admitted that my husband encouraged it, telling her not to rush so no one would suspect. But here's the problem. They needed my testimony to tie him to the plan. Without me speaking, he could walk away free. My hands trembled as I signed the papers, but I made my choice. I gave them everything. The recordings, the test results, my testimony. I told them exactly what I heard the night I pretended to be unconscious. I thought it would end there, but my husband had lawyers. They twisted the story, said he never planned to kill me, that it was only her, that he was too weak to resist her seduction. They painted him as a victim of her obsession, and part of me almost broke when I realized the law might let him go. But then came the miracle I never expected. One of the officers, a woman, told me they had checked his phone records. In those messages there were texts, him telling her to add a little more this time, him asking if I had fallen asleep yet, him promising they'd be together once I was out of the way. That was it. That was the proof. My husband wasn't innocent. He was a conspirator in my murder. When they arrested him, he didn't fight. He just looked at me, his eyes empty, and said, "You ruined everything." Not an apology, not regret, just anger that I survived. In court, I watched them both sit on the stand. The maid cried, blamed love, blamed desperation. My husband sat stone-faced like none of this was real. When the verdict came, they were both sentenced. She to years in prison for attempted murder and conspiracy. Him to even longer because he was supposed to protect me, but instead plotted against me. Walking out of that courtroom, I should have felt relief, but instead I felt hollow. The man I once trusted, the woman I once allowed into my home, they tried to erase me from this world. And for what? Lust, greed, betrayal. But I survived. And now, every time I take a sip of water, every time I cook my own meal, I remember how close I came to never seeing another sunrise. That memory fuels me. It reminds me that no matter how much people you love betray you, the strength to stand up and fight back will always save you. And to anyone listening to my story right now, never ignore the small signs. Never dismiss that sudden weakness, that unexplained dizziness, that nagging voice inside you saying something is wrong. Because sometimes the devil wears the face of someone you thought you could trust. After the trial ended, the house no longer felt like a home. I walked through each room, and it was like walking through a graveyard of memories. The dining table where he once held my hand now felt like a stage for lies. The kitchen where the maid smiled at me, serving me tea, now felt like a laboratory of death. Even the bedroom, where I had once dreamed of safety and family, now seemed poisoned. I stood in the middle of that silence and realized the most painful truth of all. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the loss of trust in everything I thought was real. People started talking, of course. Neighbors whispered. Relatives called with fake sympathy. Some even said it was my fault for letting a maid get so close. Their words cut me, but not as deeply as the looks. The pity, the gossip, the judgment. They all wanted a piece of the scandal, but none of them knew how it felt to wake up every day and wonder if the next sip of tea would be your last. None of them knew the terror of pretending to be unconscious while hearing your husband plan your death. None of them knew how it felt when the man who promised to protect you chose another woman instead. The days turned into weeks, and I forced myself to keep moving. I started cooking for myself again, though every bite felt heavy. I stopped trusting anyone with my food or drinks. Even when friends visited, I made sure to serve them, but never let them serve me. My body survived, but my mind was scarred. Nights were the worst. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing her laugh in my dreams, seeing his cold eyes staring back at me. I would touch my throat, my chest, to remind myself I was still alive, and then I'd cry silently into my pillow so no one could hear. The police called me back several times during the appeal process. His lawyers fought hard, tried to reduce his sentence, argued that he was manipulated by the maid, that he was weak, not evil. Sitting in that courtroom again, I almost believed it. Until they read his messages again. Those words, "Add a little more this time. She's almost ready. Soon we'll be free." They burned into my memory. Weak men don't write instructions on how to kill their wives. Evil men do. And he was evil. The maid sent me letters from prison. I didn't open them at first, but curiosity got the better of me. Her handwriting shook across the page, filled with apologies and confessions. She wrote about how she never meant to hurt me, how she fell in love with him the moment he smiled at her, how she lost control because he made her feel alive. She blamed herself but also blamed him, said he promised her a future, promised her love, promised her freedom if I was gone. Reading those letters didn't give me closure. They made me sicker, because all I saw was a woman who tried to justify murder with love. One evening, I burned those letters in the fireplace. I watched the flames eat the paper, curl the words into smoke, and I whispered to myself, "You will not live in my house anymore. Neither of you." That was the first time in months I felt like I was taking something back. Still, the nightmares didn't stop. Sometimes I'd hear a glass clink and jump out of my chair. Sometimes I'd see a woman in the market carrying a bag of groceries, and my chest would tighten, thinking it was her. And sometimes, late at night, I'd think about him. I'd picture his face the day he was arrested. Not ashamed, not broken, just angry that I survived. That look will haunt me until the day I die. But survival is not just about breathing. Survival is about reclaiming your life. Slowly I began to rebuild. I went to therapy, though at first I hated the idea of sitting in front of a stranger, speaking my wounds out loud. But the therapist taught me something important. That my story was not just a tragedy, it was proof of strength. I didn't just live through betrayal. I fought back. I gathered proof. I stood in court. And I won. That reminder became my anchor. The community changed too. At first, I was the woman whose maid tried to kill her. But slowly, people began to see me as the woman who fought back, the woman who refused to be silenced, the woman who survived. And though gossip never disappears, some neighbors came to me quietly, saying my courage gave them strength. One even admitted she suspected her husband was cheating, but never dared to act until she saw what I had done. In a strange way, my pain became a warning and a shield for others. Years later, I still live in the same house, but it no longer belongs to their memory. I changed the curtains, repainted the walls, replaced the furniture. The kitchen is mine again. The dining table holds laughter again, not lies. And the bedroom, though it still holds shadows, now feels like a place where I sleep with dignity, not betrayal. But I never forget. I never let myself forget, because forgetting means lowering my guard. And I swore I would never let anyone poison me again, literally or otherwise. To anyone listening, know this: betrayal can come from the people closest to you. But so can strength. I thought I was powerless, but I proved to myself that even the weakest moment can turn into the strongest decision. The maid and my husband wanted me gone, but I stood up, I exposed them, and I survived. And survival, in the end, is the sweetest revenge. The years went by, but time never fully healed the scars. I learned to function, to smile, to laugh when people were around. But inside there was always a quiet storm. I couldn't drink from a glass without staring at it first. I couldn't let anyone stir my tea without suspicion. The betrayal had rewired my instincts. Trust wasn't something I gave anymore. It had to be earned, drop by drop. But even in my guarded life, I felt something shift. Instead of being defined by what they did to me, I began to define myself by how I survived. I didn't just exist. I grew sharper, stronger, more watchful. People thought I was paranoid, but I knew better. Evil hides in plain sight, wearing the mask of love, the mask of loyalty. I had seen it. I had lived it. One day I visited the prison. It wasn't for closure, not really. It was curiosity. I wanted to see them both, locked away, stripped of freedom. When they brought my husband in, he looked different. His face was thinner, his hair grayer, but his eyes hadn't changed. Still cold, still blaming me, still holding that silent fury that I lived while his plans failed. He didn't speak a word, but he didn't need to. His silence was louder than anything. Then came the maid. She looked older too. Broken, not the smug woman who once smiled as she handed me poisoned tea. She cried the moment she saw me. She begged for forgiveness, said she couldn't sleep, said she had nightmares about me falling unconscious in front of her, about the evil she had done. I stood there listening, but inside I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no forgiveness, just emptiness. Because what she destroyed couldn't be rebuilt with tears. I left without a word, and that silence, that was my revenge. Back home, I locked the door and sat in the quiet, and for the first time I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about hurting them back. Revenge was about living, about breathing, about walking freely in a world they would never touch again. They were trapped. I was free. That was enough. Still, the memories return. Some nights I still wake up thinking I can taste the bitterness in the tea. Some mornings I still hear the faint echo of their whispers. Trauma never truly leaves, but I have learned to live with it. I don't hide from it anymore. I carry it like a scar, not as a wound. And every time I look at that scar, I remind myself, they tried to erase me, but I survived. So when people ask me, how did you live through that? I don't say much. I don't tell them about the nightmares, the screams, the silent tears. I simply say, because I had no other choice. And that's the truth. Survival isn't about strength or courage. It's about refusing to die when death is placed right in front of you. And maybe, just maybe, that refusal is the greatest act of defiance. The final time I ever thought of them was when I received a letter from the prison. It wasn't from him, it was from her, the maid. She wrote that she was dying, some illness had spread, and the prison doctor said she didn't have long. She said she wanted to see me once before she left this world. I stared at the letter for a long time. My hands shook, but not from fear, just from the weight of the choice. Should I go? Should I look at her one last time and let her speak? Or should I burn the letter and erase her like she once tried to erase me? In the end, I didn't go. I tore the letter, piece by piece, and threw it into the fire. I watched the flames curl around her words until nothing was left but ash. That was my answer. She had stolen enough of my life. I wasn't about to give her one more minute. As for him, my husband, I never heard another word. He faded into silence behind bars, and in that silence, He became a ghost long before his body ever gave up. I moved on. I built a life where they no longer existed. I traveled, I worked, I made new connections. Some people saw me as cold, but they didn't know that coldness was my armor, forged in the fire of betrayal. I wore it proudly because it reminded me that I survived what was designed to destroy me. Years later, I stood in front of a mirror, gray hair framing my face, wrinkles marking the story of my survival. And for the first time, I looked at my reflection and didn't see the victim. I didn't see the woman who had been poisoned and betrayed. I saw a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had walked through the fire and come out alive. And in that moment, I smiled, because I knew the truth. They were gone, forgotten, erased by time. But me? I was still here, breathing, living, free. That was the ending they never wanted for me. And that was the only revenge I ever needed.